I'm headed to Zion, that's where my people at. We underground now, but soon we rule above that. Kwame, and I know they coming. Bring all their armies, Jehoshaphat. Till then, I'm plugged into the law, prophets, and the good news. Now I know Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu, and Kung Fu.
Lay it all out. Yep.
Okay, it says, so he says tomorrow is the Shabbat. So this conversation is taking place on the 6th day. There's no ambushing. He's giving them a day's notice. Hey, this is what you have to do. He says, to it toward what you shall bake. All right? He said, to it toward what you shall bake. He says, and to it toward that you will boil. And all that is left over, that remains, he says, keep or lay up to you all, lakam, to you all, right? Second person plural. He says, la masharatam, for that which will be saved, or that which will be either, meaning until ha bakwa, so until the morning. So, there's a lot of interpretation in this text, but this text is the beginning of control of fire related to activities on the Sabbath. This is where it all starts. It tells us specifically, without interpretation, not to bake or boil. To bake or boil everything on the 6th day. These things should be done before the Sabbath. Calling the Sabbath Machar, which means tomorrow. But if you notice, in this particular text, it doesn't mention ash, which is fire. Fire is not mentioned at all. Therefore, we have no choice but to come to the conclusion that these are general prohibitions, which include any form of baking or boiling, whether it's modern or whether it's an ancient form of baking or boiling, because the text doesn't mention don't use fire. Is not mentioned at all. All
right, shalom alaikum, peace to you all. I want to first repeat the disclaimer that this review is by no means any disrespect. My prayer is that all Israel and those who fear Yahweh be saved. And it's still double honors to all the elders that have been pursuing and keeping the law, statutes, commandments in the faith of the Messiah to the best of their ability and understanding since before I could even read. But I would say we absolutely do have a choice, especially when interpreting and determining what the law is, lest we violate Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2 and receive those punishments in Revelation chapter 22 and verse 19. The choice we have, and I want to demonstrate, is context. Without context, we're left to generalize and presumptuously infer what the explicit word of Yahweh said. For example, as it was said, fire, the control of fire, general prohibitions for the Sabbath is not mentioned at all here in Exodus chapter 16. We can only say that Yahweh provides food for 6 days, and we are to prepare and gather double for the 7th day, which is the Sabbath. Why? Because according to context and the precepts, we have 6 days to work, and on the 7th, we rest on the Sabbath. That's the context. Quick point. What if I said, pursuant to Exodus chapter 16 and verse 29, it's unlawful to leave one's house on the Sabbath day? Without proper context, we won't know that this is in reference to the food that was sent and gathered for 6 days. And the clear prohibition to abide ye every man in his house on the 7th day is not a commandment for the Sabbath day commandment, but specific to Exodus chapter 16. Without proper understanding, we might also be able to accuse the Messiah for customarily going out of his place on the Sabbath day to the synagogue.
So, now, if we go to the next text on page 2, it tells us that the following text is clear. It's very clear in English as well as in the Hebrew. The key word is the second word in this particular sentence. The root word is a word called ba'ir, kindle or consume. And it reads as follows: La'a taba'irwa, bakala masha yakama, Yom ha-Shabbat. So we have, you all shall not kindle or consume in the day of the Sabbath. We know it says kindle or consume in all your, kindle or consume fire in all your dwellings in the day of the Sabbath. What we can't do and when we cannot do it. So we have a clear prohibition.
Clear prohibitions may not be so clear without proper context. For example, you might have a son who goes too far playing Uno with his Abba. Knowing that his father does not like profanity, he quickly slams down the card and says, "Got your ass." Then his Abba gets a serious face and replies, "Don't play with me." Clear prohibition, right? Now, do we stop playing Uno or do the son watch his mouth? A biblical example, Exodus chapter 23 and verse 19. It says, "Thou shalt not seethe or boil a kid in his mother's milk." Here's a clear prohibition, right? But without proper context relating to young animals and the first fruit offering, we can say, even though fire is not mentioned here, the only way you can boil or seethe water is by some means of ancient or modern fire. And this is the beginning of the prohibitions of cooking kids. This is confusion, right? We must consider the context. And what are the precepts?
So let's get understanding of the word by ear, all right, which is kindle or consume. Now, by ear is translated as also meaning brutish, and the definition of it is to burn or to consume. We have those exact letters probably being used in different places throughout the scripture, but these are the five that we can go to where people have agreed over the years that this grammar in these 5 places is exactly the same. All right, so, and this is a partial excerpt from those verses. Exodus 35 and 3, which is the scripture in question. It says, "Ye shall kindle no fire." Deuteronomy 21 and 9 says, "So shalt thou put away." Judges 20 and 13 says, "And put away evil from Israel." And then it tells us, 1 Kings 14 and 10 says, "As a man taketh away dung till it be." And Ezekiel 39 and 10 says, "They shall burn the weapons." Okay, so now, the grammar of by ear, kindle or consume, in the verses that I just read, cannot be kindled. The word consume applies to all of the verses.
I want to bring this screenshot up again. Notice the word kindle is being used to translate by ear. Here it says literal when followed by the word ash, or fire in English. We have a second definition. So it can't be everywhere we see the word by ear. Consume must be applied to all of the verses. Look, here we have a third definition. And it starts with figurative consume. Utterly remove or take away, right? It's figurative. What I want to highlight is from these 5 verses that this word is so-called exactly the same. We have 3 of them grouped into this figurative consume section, while Exodus 35 and 3 is in the literal kindle section. And as for Ezekiel 39, when the King James reads and burn, this is the word wehiseku, or I think you might say wahashal, and set on fire, or literally kindle, is where we see the word ubairu, or the root word ba'ir.
Kindle is applied, the word kindle is applied to Shemot 35 and 3. We would freeze to death in the wintertime if we're going exactly by what is written. So either we have a built-in loophole or it doesn't mean kindle.
Or we cannot freeze to death in the winter by keeping this verse in its proper context in regards to all the metal work that was needed for the tabernacle. When considering the surrounding text and the basic precepts, this is far from far-fetched. In fact, this is the way I was first taught this verse. However, that way is not even mentioned here.
Ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations.
Remember the previous chapter, they talked about melting gold and silver and copper and bronze. So this is primarily going into your cooking and working. It's forbidden to kindle your fire. Go ahead.
So now, do we kindle dung? Do we kindle evil? Do we kindle guilty blood? You see? So you see how now the translators in the English were not really paying attention to the context of that particular word and using it consistently as they translate it. So we have to use a word that fits all of the places where that word, is used. And you shall not consume the fire, which means using actually the fire outside of its natural use, which is heat and which is light.
I can't find this definition of consume anywhere. And again, we don't have to use consume every time because we have at least 3 definitions of the word ba'ir.
So now, in basic conclusion, the problem is not the electricity or the fire on the Sabbath day. The problem is that fire is burned on the Sabbath at power plants. This fire boils water, which means it's consuming, the water is consuming the fire, all right? The water is pressurized. This turns a turbine, which turns a generator. So it is only electricity generated by consuming fire on the Sabbath, which is prohibited. Batteries, torches, solar, wind, green energy, all electricity can be used on the Sabbath if it is not generated by fire boiling water. That's it. That's the prohibition.
I want to conclude with the black and white commandment, adding no grayish interpretation nor subtracting any plain witness or context. Yahweh created the heavens and the earth and everything in it within 6 days, and on the 7th day he rests, creating and sanctifying the Sabbath day. So then we are commanded to rest. Now, we commanded not to pick up sticks. We are commanded to rest. We commanded not to boil water. We are commanded to rest. No, we're commanded not to pick a certain amount of grain on the Sabbath day. We are commanded to rest. We're commanded to rest on the Sabbath day and keep it set apart. That's it. The point, spirit, intent of this law is not fire or healing someone or how far you walk, but to rest. We should sincerely know what work is. This law is not too hard for us to understand, and any adding or taking away from this is the traditions and translations of men.
No fire can be consumed on the Sabbath day. The fire cannot be used to boil water for electricity. It can only be used for heat. Fire can even be started on a Sabbath day, and fire can burn on a Sabbath day. Fire can burn the wood, it can burn coal, it can burn natural gas, it can burn propane on a Sabbath day, but it cannot boil the water on a Sabbath day.
I feel like I'm the one and the word is the true red pill. When I see how deep this goes, keep reading and the truth will be revealed. But take that blue pill and let Morpheus put you back to sleep. I'm gonna keep fighting though. I feel like Neo in the Matrix. Yeah.